Hi everyone, I have a special guest today. For us, I'm going to be speaking with Igor Vasilevsky, and I have found him on Facebook. We first connected on Facebook, and I'm just so amazed about everything that I see. Like, he just blows my mind with every post. And I just wanted to speak with him about spirituality, about the spiritual path and the perils and the pitfalls and everything else that comes along with it. And yeah, I think we'll just flow with it and see where it goes. So, would you like to introduce yourself? Like, what's your journey? Where are you coming from? What you're all about?
Sure. So, hello to Roxana. Hello to everyone. Thank you for reaching out to have this chat with me about my work. So, I live in Australia, in Melbourne, Australia. I was born in Belarus, which is Eastern Europe, and I came here quite early, um, which created all sorts of um, trauma, I suppose you could say,
Mm,
about the way that I assimilated in this culture, with a very vastly different background, which is something that I write a lot about. Um, so in a lot of ways, you could say that was a start because that was a core wounding in itself.
mhm,
It probably wasn't until about the 20s though when I really started to question things and was going through quite a lot, and then started to go inwards and explore what was happening, um, understanding what was happening with others. And I always gravitated towards kind of, needing to or being curious about what was happening behind people's thoughts, people's emotions, people's behaviors, including my own. So I kind of went down the rabbit hole and did the whole eat, pray, love thing and quit my job, which was, IT full time,
mhm,
and just began to travel and did the whole shamanic thing in South America, did the whole India thing, um, and then came back and I studied as a transpersonal counselor, which is transpersonal is very much, it's a very holistic, broad approach to healing. It includes Western psychotherapeutic methods, but it also includes the spiritual and shamanic concepts at its core. So that plus a lot of different other modalities and experiences led me to open up my own practice. As I started off being called a counselor, called myself a counselor, and I've kind of evolved through different labels, I could say. Counselor, psychotherapist, practitioner, coach, and eventually healer. So mm, now I suppose, I don't really know exactly what to call myself. I just know that, much like you, we had this chat before, I just know that I can help people in various different ways.
mm,
Um, yeah, so that's it in a nutshell.
mm. Yeah, I see you write a lot about people who have kind of ventured out from their home and from their roots, right, and into went into some other kind of spiritual practice or culture and adopted a completely new personality, and how that kind of um, is a little bit traumatizing almost, and it's like rejection of self in pursuit of a more glorified and better version, right, and how the actual deep healing is really coming back to the roots and circling back, and how that really deepens a person. Could you talk to that a little bit? Like, what's your experience with that, and like, how do you help people with that?
Sure. So, you know, in my journey, I'll start there. Um, at a certain point, I realized that I'd repressed a lot of my, Eastern European Jewish culture within myself because it was simply not acceptable, not allowed in the Anglo-Saxon culture I found myself in.
Mm,
Um, and through that healing, through the shedding of the repression around that and the fear of not belonging, if I was that, I began to drop back and own some of my heritage and own my lineage, uh, basically reclaim my gifts, within my ethnicity, and then help, basically allowing that to come through me in the context of the new culture that I was in.
Mm.
So a lot of people I work with, kind of, because I live in a very cosmopolitan country, a lot of people struggle with the same thing.
Yeah.
Even if they're not first generation, even if they're not, let's say, immigrants of first generation or second generation, they have certain ethnicities from different past cultures running through them. And so quite often, if we go deeper than just the purely personal biographical childhood, the mother, the father, the home, we'll find streams of energy coming through them that are awaiting to expand and be explored and be owned and be celebrated. And because when we're disconnected from our roots, we never find a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
We try to belong in a certain culture by constantly repressing the roots to find conformity. So it's a scary path. It's like a lot of healing, because there's a lot of identity breakdowns that needs to happen, right? It's like if I've built my identity of being a courteous, polite person who waits for everybody to finish talking before I begin, and that's not part of my cultural roots. And if I was to own that and begin to be more confrontational, more direct, more loud in my expressiveness, what does that do to my personality that's been built, my identity, what's been built around, if I do that, I'm not going to be accepted. So, I mean, and it's not always just in the immigration space that this happens. We build identities on all sorts of things. We build identities on, I need to be a helper, a caretaker. Who am I without that? How am I going to be accepted without that? So it all comes back to the same egoic structures. It's just more amplified in the case of, I would say, immigration and immigrants.
I really love this this metaphor of growing roots, because it's like it's something that's unseen, and I love that you have the tree picture behind you.
Yeah.
It's like, so we build the roots, so that's like the conscious work. We build the personality, and that's what's seen, and that's who I show up as. But then we also have to dive deep and like not dig into, but like go into the roots and grow in the darkness and the underneath, the under the surface stuff. And that can seem scary, because we are kind of letting go of the attachment to the scene, and then have to explore what's unseen, what other parts of us are there, and really go in there with that consciousness and awareness, and own that, and like really expand into that, because we cannot just grow the crown, we have to grow the roots as well. That's like the tree of life. I love that. And so that kind of brings me to this idea of freedom and what true freedom is, right? And it's not just a freedom based as an identity, like I am free, right? It's not an identity. It's not something that some kind of personality structure or type. It's real freedom. I can be this, I can be that, I can be the other, and I'm not bound by anything, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you talk about that, it reminds me of the philosopher Hegel, who said something like, I can't remember if he was talking about freedom, but his definition that was really applicable here was identity indifference. I find that the most eloquent, the most concise way of expressing the truth we're talking about, right? It's like, I'm indifferent to what identity I take on, which gives me the freedom to take on any role or identity I want at any stage. And so what I find growth at a deeper level is about moving towards freedom.
Yeah.
And it is about constantly finding and disidentifying from this identity or that identity. And what happens is, I find that, the psyche is built on comfort, right? So as we let go of one identity, quite often we begin to drop. And that's a scary place to drop. And as we do, the psyche will constantly look for other identities to grab onto, right? So it's kind of like, oh my God, let's say I've dropped this identity around being, I don't know, let's say a caretaker or a helper, coming back to the example I gave. And then it's like in the fall towards the abyss, right, which seems really scary, which is actually really freeing.
Yeah.
There is this propensity to cling on to other ones, like, for example, oh my God, I am nobody. So therefore, all of a sudden, I've just created an identity of being a victim, right? And then you let go of that one and you go, well, no, Igor's to blame for making me let go of that identity. So now the identity is perpetrator, right? Or maybe, oh, well, if I'm not this, if I'm not a caretaker, perhaps I can be the one taken care of. And so that becomes another identity to disentangle from. So it's never about stopping what we're doing to grab onto the polar opposite. It's more about just having the fluidity within the psyche, within the soul, to be able to go, well, all right, I'll take this on for now. I know I'm not that though. And I can easily let that go. It's that malleability.
Yeah.
That we're talking about.
And it's like holding that space of nothingness and void and kind of holding on loosely to whatever we're playing with at the moment. Like, okay, now I'm wearing this hat and okay, I can take it off because I'm always in that space. So how would you guide people to feel more safe, knowing that there's that deep void, that nothingness, how they can create?
Yeah. Well, look, it's not an easy answer, so I'm going to answer it in a little bit of a complicated way. So first of all, there's nothing wrong with holding on to identities and identifying with identities.
Yeah.
So in the healing spaces, quite often, or in the New Age space, or sometimes in the therapeutic space, there's this judgment around holding on to ego or holding on to identity or even coping mechanisms or being unhealed. At the same time, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just constricting. Because if I believe myself to be this, therefore I have to defend it, and I can't be anything else other than that.
Yeah.
So first of all, there's the need to give permission to a lot of people who come see me. A lot of people who come see me, they've been on the journey for a while. And it's actually just about helping them disentangle from their judgments of not being healed, of being in this identity or that identity, of still having triggers, of still blaming dad or mom, right? So coming back to your question, how do I help them with it? So sometimes it's about giving them permission just to stay there. To actually accept, hey, no, you know what? I'm going to stop dropping identities. That can be the scary thing. And it kind of goes, against a lot of the healing stuff, which just says, keep letting go, keep letting go. At the same time, if a person comes to me and they don't suffer from this constant malignancy of needing to constantly let go, and they're just really struggling and they're fed up with, let's say, a victim consciousness, then it's about resourcing that person so that their nervous system feels safe to drop into the unknown, because the abyss is the unknown.
Yeah.
And the unknown is terrifying to the psyche that needs knowing for certainty.
Yeah.
So I never push anyone to go face your fears, as the crying call goes in the therapeutic space. No, because when you do that, you can easily get re-traumatized, overwhelmed by repressed emotions, destabilize your life. I mean, I'm someone who went through that in a painful way.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not about spiraling out and then going, I don't know who I am, because there's a danger in that. When you're in the void in an ungrounded way, that's what we might classify as mental health issues. People who walk around, they don't know who they are anymore. They either go into that space or they become, if they're grounded deeply enough, they become a guru or a mystic, right? Joseph Campbell had this beautiful phrase. He said, something like the mystic swims in the same ocean that the schizophrenic drowns in. So, you know, having said all that, there is definitely a place to provide the resources and the safety. First of all, I guide the person to actually access those resources themselves, but also I become the resource for them. I hold the space of safety in the void. And because of my ability to project my energy and hold the space for them, so empathically extend myself to hold them emotionally, energetically, and psychologically as an energetic safety net, then when they do feel ready enough, they can step off the ledge of the identity that they've been holding on to and dip their toe into the void, into what it's like not being that thing anymore. And then they quickly, you know, retract the toe back into that identity, which is okay. It's sometimes a process of titration, right? A pendulation, in and out, before you go, okay, this is okay. I can just let that go. It's not that scary. I'm going to be safe. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to disappear, which is, you know, which are all the fears that come up in that space. Some people are resourced enough to just jump off the ledge very quickly, and they're okay with it. They just need, sometimes they just need a conversation to do that. So everybody's different and unique.
Yeah, I feel like many people who are not well-resourced themselves, they haven't had an authority figure or parental figure that held that space for them. So they just do not know how to be with their own emotions, be with their own fears. So then it's really valuable for someone else to hold that space for them and be that kind of parental figure until they find their own feet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a major part of it. At the same time, our parents, most of us, I don't know about you, but mine certainly weren't enlightened. So they weren't in a place of beingness. So that energetic space was never modeled for us, right? We don't even know it exists. Most people's nervous systems doesn't know what it feels like to be in being. And what they've learned from their family is that they need an identity just to be accepted, just to survive. And so therefore, letting go of identity feels like a threat and a danger. If you look at a child, you know, a child's always monitoring the family of how to survive, have its needs met, be accepted, and be loved. And that's always conditional and always based on some kind of rules and beliefs, which then coalesce into what you and I are calling the identity. So yeah, that's essentially it.
I don't really have like more to add to this. I would love, you know, that I really wanted to speak on certain topics. I really wanted to touch on relationships, and especially because I saw you writing about the trauma bonds and people who because I see this a lot as well, you know, women, especially in like women circles and women spaces, where when they come into their power and their fullness and safety and whatever, they tend to do that at the expense of men, or at the expense of some man who hurt them, and you know, then they paint the man or all men in a certain light, right? They are empowered and they feel like, I am the prize, I am the queen, I am the goddess. But at the same time, they put men down, right? And they put down the kind of healing relationship. And I feel like every relationship has its value and it has its benefit. So just to reject all relationships and just wait for the perfect imagined dream is not very realistic. And I feel like you kind of share the same views.
Yeah. I mean, it's the dark side of feminism. Dare I say that publicly? Although I say it all the time on my Facebook page, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just a sneaky aspect of the shadow that can, when it's given permission and language and celebration, will give voice to the shadow. And so by that I mean, when a woman is angry, it's like, what was it, Shakespeare or Euripides said, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Right? So that trauma, if it's not worked with in a clear, truthful way, and then given this beautiful platform of, at the moment, a lot of that's happening in the new age spiritual space, where it's like, I'm not a recovery shop for men anymore,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, that's false power. It's like, I get what they're trying to do. It's like, it's trying to stop the pattern of being the submissive and the constant caretaker, but not by going to the wounded polarity of that, which is like, I don't give a shit anymore. I'm ultra independent. I need no men kind of thing, right? So that ends up giving voice to it. And I'm not mocking, I'm simply acting out that energy as it sounds quite often, right? It happens from men as well. I'm not trying to defend patriarchy in any way. There's plenty of abuse that I could talk to about the damage that the unhealthy masculine within men and within women does.
Yeah.
But that's in fact an unhealthy patriarchal energy in itself that we're talking about. When it goes to, well, I'm going to crush the male because I'm an empowered woman. That's the subtext that can happen. Yeah. Now, having said that, there's plenty of beautifully empowered women that I've met, which don't hold that views. They've got this, I'm not going to say quiet power, but it's not angry power. It's a power that says, no fucking way, you're not going to walk over me or anyone, but does it in a clean way. Yeah. Right. So that's that part of it. And the trauma bond, look, again, I feel like trauma bond is a word that's just kind of become a buzzword to do away with relationships which are seen as like toxic, codependent. And so there's a lot of people kind of going, well, I'm going to find my queen now, or my enlightened king, right? That is going to be pure and from the essence of the soul at the depth of my heart and nothing else, right? And unfortunately, that's not clear-eyed at all, right? That's an extreme, and a person who's going to be waiting for that is going to be waiting lifetimes to find a person like that. We're in the human condition, which means every relationship is going to have trauma in it. Yeah. And we're going to be bonding through trauma on various levels. Now, that's not a bad thing. Yeah. Carl Jung said, Carl, you've heard of Carl Jung, I'm guessing, yeah. Carl Jung said, one of the biggest problems in marriages is that people are getting married for love. They should be getting married for growth. Now, I can feel the people watching this, some of them being triggered already, because they're going to be saying, well, it's not a workshop. My relationship's not a workshop. That's for therapy. Good luck. That's all I can say. Because if every time someone's in the relationship is going to get triggered and you're going to say, not my shit, I'm turning away and I'm waiting for you to fix that with a therapist, it's not human. Yeah. It's not compassionate. Yeah. Of course, there are times that every person's got to draw a line and go, look, I can't hold this. That's something you really need to take up with a therapist, a healer, or someone else. But yeah, I think it's just going to be more balance. And so trauma bonding, it's okay if we kind of have a dynamic at play, like you and I, let's say, Roxana, we have an unhealthy dynamic and we're like, oh man, we're bonding over trauma here. We need to look at that. That's okay to use that term in that way. I feel that's clean, that's clear, right? But if it has this judgment behind it,
Yeah.
oh, we're in a trauma bonded relationship and we need to find our twin flames now. Yeah, I find that energy murky.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's the mindset of either or. So it's me versus you, or it's me, I'm good, you are bad. Is that duality on the right and wrong, left and right, and whatever. And the more compassionate approach is really embracing all. It's like, okay, I am this, and I am human, and I have my wounds, and you are human, you have your wounds, you have your divine, and we can both kind of meet each other in this space, where in this spaciousness, where there is really space for everything, for all of you to come in, rather than I'm just looking for the divine, I'm just looking for the empowered, for the healed, and this is all I want. Because that's it's not realistic. Like I'm definitely not fully healed, and I think what's really dangerous with the self-help and the spiritual communities is that people chase after healing. They dig into, they pursue and chase after those like wow breakthroughs and amazing moments, and really there's no need. Like we can just live life and allow the things to come up by themselves, right? Rather than just like chasing the highs and all the time having this like amazing experiences. It's just unsustainable.
Absolutely. I mean, it's propagated by the mythology, the heroic romantic mythology of the New Age spiritual movement, that we are in a great awakening. And every child right now is clearing all the karmic trauma of every lineage and every ethnicity and every culture and Mother Gaia and the galactic. And so therefore, I have to completely dedicate myself to all my feelings and sit inside of them and heal every single nook and cranny of them. Now, I'm saying that for a reason. I'm not saying that, that's perhaps true. Some of that's perhaps happening. But that can feed into this narcissistic self-absorption in the healing process, in the healing journey. So, I mean, I was one of those people for a long time. You too. Yay! Ooh, high five. Yeah. So to be able to pull out of that and kind of go, okay, well, that's happening. And I have people who come to me and who are really stuck in that healing vortex or trauma vortex, as somatic experiencing practitioners would probably acknowledge that to be. And to ground in this physical reality, to face the human condition, to accept that we carry densities and we don't have to clear every single one of them all the time. And what you say, it's like instead of digging and going down and looking, living life more horizontally rather than vertically. And as things come up, look at them at the time they come up.
Yeah.
So it's like healing, not for the process of healing, but kind of growing rather than healing.
Yeah, and living, just living life. And then the healing process and the growth, it just happens naturally. I don't have to make that my job, my hobby, my entire life.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have anything else that you wanted to share or talk about or mention or add?
A lot of things. I mean, it's enjoyable talking about, I guess, where I'm at and how I see things. And as you know, that's what I primarily use my Facebook wall for, to express my views, to challenge those things that I feel people are indoctrinated in.
Oh, a question comes to me, but it's kind of controversial. I've asked you this before.
Okay.
I think it would be fun to speak on it, because a lot of people are very deeply committed to one side or the other of the whole vaccine and the whole COVID-19, all of this, right? It's such a charged topic, and there are a lot of people who are on like extreme polarities. So could you speak to that? Like what's the right way to see this?
Yeah. So, I have people who are on both sides of the fence. I'm connected to people who are pro and anti.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I converse with them, whether it's about that or about anything, I tend to listen on multiple levels, not just what's being said, but the energy behind it.
Yeah.
And so quite often people on the pro side or anti side will be coming with a very charged egoic energy. And so that's when I'm not receiving them anymore, because I'm not going to receive the energy of their judgmentality or anger or vehemence or righteousness or sanctimony, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then some people will speak on either side of the fence and will be very clean. It's their truth. They're connecting to it deeply. It's their intuition. And I'm that I receive the information. I receive the energy behind the information.
Yeah.
Because I feel they're cleanly transmitting who they are. And I'm happy to commune and connect, because that's connection, right? So yeah, that's kind of how not only I deal with that subject, but when I work with people individually, one-on-one, that's what my radar's always tuned into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My job as a therapist is to lead the person to their heart's truth, to their deeper truth, to their resonant alignedness in their energetic center, rather than to, what's right in my mind or not. And sometimes that means I bring them into a place of like something that I would never condone or accept myself. But that doesn't matter, because that's who they are. It's not about me. And so often, in my work, I'll end up channeling through something, saying something, or leading them into something where I'm like, I can't believe that's true. I can't believe I just said that. It's breaking my understandings, my paradigms, and that's okay.
Mm.
That's okay, because it's for the other person. And it opens me up in the process.
Yeah. Something really interesting and powerful that you said recently was about the teacher student dynamic, and how for some time the student may rely on the teacher, but at one point the teacher might present some kind of opposing information or some kind of conflicting direction, and then the student has to find their own truth.
Yeah. So, it's kind of like sometimes I just reflect on what I write. And quite often I write things that are paradoxically opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and so sometimes somebody will write, yeah, but didn't you say something different before? And I'm like, yeah, I did. I'm comfortable with being, I'm not going to say contradictory, because contradiction is something different. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about being paradoxical. And we need to get into the very theosophical discussion of what truth is. Truth is something that is flimsy. It is something in one moment, but in the next, it may be completely different. So what I say to one person, I can say something completely different to a different person in a session. And that's the thing that they need to hear at the time, at their moment of growth. So it's not about consistency between what you say necessarily. It's how you say it, it's where it comes from, it's whether it's for the benefit of the other person or not. So having said that, I know I'm aware of stories in the 1970s where people like Richard Alpert, Ram Dass used to go to sit at the Guru's feet in India and follow their instructions. And then after 3 months, they would come back to the Guru and they would get an instruction that was diametrically opposed to their first instruction. And they'll be like getting so frustrated until they would understand that because the mind would kind of go, well, but is it this or is it that? Is it this or, and eventually there's this point where the mind flips out and goes offline, and they drop beyond the mind into their own intuitive truth.
Yeah.
So the guru is leading the disciple with contradictory information into their own knowing. And that's where, you know, I still think that we do need teachers, right? We need to have faith at certain points in someone or something else,
Yeah.
to lead us at least into some kind of direction.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We need that. But at a certain point, we need to drop that into our own knowing. And one of the best ways I know for, you know, traditionally for it being done, and I'm finding myself doing the same thing, just organically, spontaneously, is at a certain point, giving paradoxes to the mind in order to bring the person into their own inner guidance and drop their reliance on me.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, there are like seasons in life where one cannot reliably like rely on their own, because there's so much transformation happening. There's so much like opposing information all the time, and so many different processes that you just cannot really distinguish and feel into what's right. So then it's very beneficial to have somebody who's very steady and very strong and very, who can give direction, right? And then it's like a flow. Sometimes we need this, and sometimes really we need our own direction, our own knowing, and then we can guide others also.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've definitely, you know, when you were speaking of the guru and guru disciple relationship, I was remembering my time with my guru, because I had that time where, you know, I was just following everything that she was saying, and everything was like, oh, this is the right thing, and everything's just kind of going smoothly. And then I had this period where everything she said was just like totally opposite. Even I was reading her book, one page is this, then the other page is that. One time I feel like this, then I feel like that. Like, it was just such a confusing time. And like at one point I was just like, fuck this. Like, I cannot live in this state of like constant tension, almost like mental tension. And then, you know, this like beautiful knowing and a beautiful certainty came through from my heart. And it wasn't like a rigid center. It was like a center that's fluid and kind of flowing with the moment. And the truth was in each moment, rather than some kind of objective truth from above that I have to follow, right? Because I feel like there's not objective truth. There is truth in each moment. And it's like, there's this saying that, you know, one man's poison is another man's medicine. And that's so true, because you cannot generalize, and you know, the truth won't apply to everyone all the time at each moment. It's like we really have to meet the person where they are and see what's right for them. Because like, I want to bring this back to the trauma bonds and these relationships. You know, it's like, yes, the ultimate relationships is based on safety, is based on love and compassion and understanding. But if what's in your life right now is different from that, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It doesn't mean that you should reject it and discard it because it doesn't look like that. It's in your life because it's in your life, and it's an opportunity to grow. And it's like, I always feel like, if you know, there's a lot of this advice like, oh, just leave his ass, he's no good, he's a narcissist, he's an unavailable. And okay, so you reject him, then another man comes, you reject him because he's going to be the same. Then another man comes, and if we just keep rejecting people, how will we ever learn? How will we ever grow and open our hearts? Because it's not the people, it's like, it's my own stuff that stands in the way, like love, right? And so if somebody who comes into my energetic space and they are met with some kind of obstacle to love, that means it's in me, it's probably in them as well. But my job is not to focus on them and their shit and what they have to fix. My job is to focus on my own stuff and what's stopping me from seeing that person as love and loving that person, right? Because if my essence is love, which it is, then how, like, what is in me that's kind of blocking that? So rather than reject and distance myself and isolate myself from people, from love, from connection, right? Because that's what, when the more we do that, like the more we're saying no to people, to connections, the more isolated we feel, the more alone we feel. And then it's like, it becomes that like self-fulfilling prophecy almost, that then we just end up alone, and there are no opportunities, there are no more people coming in because we've said no to all of them. And it's not a very nice place to be in. Like, my philosophy in life is to say yes to life, say yes to what's in front of me, and make the best out of what is. I wouldn't advise everyone to just go into like abusive situations, right? Because that's, you need tools and you need guidance, and if somebody feels like they really cannot handle something, then don't go into it. But like the my general view on life is to really say yes to things and grow through them, seeing it as like especially relationships, they are meant for growth. Love is the benefit, but the purpose is growth.
Yeah, yeah. And that's, totally valid truth to have, totally valid, worldview, relationship view to have. And, for somebody else, it may be the exact opposite. We're talking about these paradoxical truths, right? For someone else, it can be like, you've been saying yes your whole life. You got to say no for a while, sister, or brother. So it's so individual, as we're saying, right? It's so unique. It's like you can have someone who's been, and I'm not saying at all this is you, but let's just take what you're describing. Sometimes I'll have someone talking to me with a very spiritualized identity, right? It's like, oh, I have to be compassionate and I have to be loving and I cannot turn away from people and I have to be Mother Teresa or embodied Buddha or whatever else, right? And so with this person, it's like it's deprogramming the brainwashing. And it's kind of going, at the core of it, actually, you weren't allowed to say no in childhood to mom, were you? Or to dad. And it's about working through that. And it's about getting them actually for a while, sometimes maybe even to be a little, God forbid, harsh. Oh, spiritual, toxic, scary word, to be harsh and cruel. But sometimes that's actually necessary just to recover the energy of assertion that's been locked into judgments of arrogance, of cruelty, of aggression. And so we play with that in the session. But coming back to what you said about, the one's sort of truth and then finding a balance and not just having one rigid thing, that's the problem with paradigms. That's my, that's why I've been writing so much challenging paradigms, because there's absolute, you're right? We've lost Roxana.
Sorry, my phone was ringing.
Oh, yeah. Where were we? Oh, yeah. So paradigms, right? So absolutisms, they're built on absolutisms. It's like we have to be compassionate, or we have to be believing in impermanence. Everything's impermanent, and therefore I'm just going to put up with this abuse. So there is this danger of getting deeper truths and deeper wisdoms, because I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying that we have to be careful about how we appropriate them. And that is why I believe that lots of people actually would do a lot better with really good grounded psychotherapy before trampolining into the spiritual spaces. Otherwise, there's a lot of damage that can be done.
Yeah.
That, there's a reason, and I've written about this. I believe that there's a reason why these teachings have been hidden from the average man, right, in all the cultures, until they were ready.
Yeah.
And now we've got this emancipation. Everything's available. Let's go drink ayahuasca in the jungles, and then let's go do 5 vipassanas in a row. Because I'm going to accelerate my spiritual journey, and then I'm going to be underlying that is like, I'm going to become perfect so my daddy will love me. Well, that's what we have to start with.
Yeah.
Because the other stuff is just going to unhinge and disbalance your nervous system. That's not ready for that sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Now, for some people, it may be, no doubt. But you know, I'm just being the devil's advocate here. I'm talking to what I see a lot happen in those spaces.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can be really dangerous. And I've seen people go really far and really do some terrible things to themselves and others because they just became so unhinged, and because they just went totally off into this like magical land of whatever, you know, and it's like no connection at all to reality. It's just it's living in the body but in some kind of fantasy. And it's like, you know, I can definitely see my own journey, you know, me going to India and finding myself and following all these teachings and all of that. Like it has been useful. It has been greatly useful. But yeah, at the core of it was trying to prove myself or trying to improve myself to have that love. And you know, now that I've kind of circled back and I found the real reason, and I can, like, I've become grounded, I've come back to my roots and my upbringing and my ancestry and all of that, I no longer have that drive to prove and improve. And I can see that, you know, all of this journey was immensely worthwhile and valuable for me, right? But I know that a lot of people, they don't get to circle back. They kind of go off and they get lost in the space, in the void, and they kind of float around. And what's really important is to really come back, right? Come back to the...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just important. I don't know if important's the right word. I find it important, but I think that there's a greater freedom in, you know, becoming aware of our illusions and what we've bought into, to really not face reality. That's what we're talking about here. So yeah, I mean, I needed this journey too. Again, I'm not saying anything's wrong with being indoctrinated in something for a while, but eventually it's healthy, I think, to come out of cultish kind of, you know, paradigmatic programming, so that we can come back to more of ourselves, more of our roots, more of our community, more of our family, because so many people, that's why I often use the word cultish, because so many people that end up in the spiritual stream, they really they really swallow this idea that families kind of like will, with their toxicity and unconsciousness, will pull them back into somewhere they don't want to be, which is the perfect brainwashing to disconnect from your roots, from your family. There's no compassion or love in that. Now, having said that, yeah, sometimes it's good to take a vacation from them, see the patterns, do some growth. But if you get barred behind this ideology, I've seen lots of people, it took me a while to come back and go, hey, no, I want to be connected to my family, you know? Yeah. At the same time, I don't know why it's popping in, but if you still have time, you want to talk about the masculine and feminine stuff? I'd love to hear your opinions on the polarity things going on.
So the thing is, I really appreciate the conversation, and I really appreciate there is a lot of value in it, and I can recognize the value in it, and I can recognize how it can help in, you know, male female relating in relationships. But at the same time, it's kind of become like another code, another religion, another dogma. This is the way and the only way. And whenever something becomes that's, to me, that's unhealthy. It's like, yeah, I can learn from anything and kind of integrate and incorporate it into my own life to make my own life, enrich my own life and those around me. But as soon as I start believing that this is the way and the only way, and you have to be this way, otherwise your life is a failure, then that's already unhealthy.
Yeah. So do you, when you work as a coach, do you kind of work with you know, any polarity stuff, or do you kind of just leave that out of the coaching that you do?
It depends. I'm not that big into polarity. Like I use it for my own life, but not really in my work.
Right. Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I find it quite an interesting space. I think you've spoken very well to it. I do think that there's a place for it. It does come up in my sessions, but yeah, there is that danger of getting lost in it, being programmed by it, and then have unfair expectations on yourself and your partner, right? So it's like, I mean, really, polarity teachings are talking about a really deep understanding, right? A deep exploration of the dynamics of the feminine and the masculine principles that animate all of us and the universe, right? The yin and yang. Now, that's an ideal. That's like archetypal level. That's like a blueprint level. But that's just a blueprint of who we are. And what it's suggesting is we should be like the blueprint in order to polarize in relationships. We're not blueprints. We're manifestations that happen from the blueprints, right? So it kind of does away, I find, with a lot of the human messiness, with the human condition, with the substance on top of the blueprint, right? And so you got a lot of people walking around, and people come to me quite often and kind of go, well, my deeper feminine is not feeling your deeper masculine or something like that, right? And I'm like, actually, it kind of feels like you're really uncomfortable in just being present with me or just talking to me in a human way, and you're jumping into spiritual ideology right now. So I find that it's kind of dangerous or misleading in that sort of way, because then let's say a man does that workshop, comes home and goes, right, well, you're not allowing me to lead you all the way, and so therefore we're not polarizing, and so
that's wrong.
who's the relationship, right? Hey,
yeah, and it's this right and wrong duality again, right? Like this
exactly.
Is that's wrong.
Exactly. It begins to feed this right, wrong, the perfect, imperfect, the, and it, once again, all of that is just comes back to, something maybe in childhood or beyond that, around, I have to be perfect, I have to be right, otherwise I don't get, otherwise I don't survive, otherwise I'm not loved. So yeah, but at the same time, there's a lot of value there too, because quite often when I'll drop in with someone in my life, maybe personally or intimately, or in sessions, sometimes that can manifest for sure. Where, let's say, the person that I'm working with, let's say a female, is desiring a very deep, clear, clean, safe, masculine witnessing and container. So my ability to access some of that, bring that into the space, can help her to heal some of the trauma with the unsafe aspects of the masculine. So there is value there. I'm not saying there isn't. I just think that it's incomplete in the way it's being taught.
Yeah, and I feel like I don't want to be just boxed in, like because I'm a female that I have to be feminine all the time. Because, for example, in my work with people, very often I show up like masculine, like very potent, strong masculine energy comes through me. And so if I say, oh no, that's wrong, I shouldn't be that, then I'm blocking myself off from helping somebody or even relating with somebody, because I don't feel like I am or I have to be fully feminine to be a good woman or to be an acceptable human being, right? There's so much nuance and there's so much freedom really to be whatever wants to be, and to like try to box myself in and always watch my actions and watch my words and kind of control myself. That doesn't really sit well with me. But I know also that the polarity teachings, they focus a lot on like free expression of the feminine, but it's still within some kind of constraints. And to me, you know, and I see that a lot of women take that as kind of as gospel, like this is how I'm supposed to be, and if I'm anything other than, then I'm wrong, and I cannot be masculine because God forbid I'm masculine and I turn off my man. Like, well, it's okay. It's okay to have some kind of miscommunication or have some kind of argument or some kind of misunderstanding. It's okay. That's being human. Like, I don't find that like there's space for humanness and there's not really space for God. It's just like you're female, you're male.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had something pop in while you were talking, and now I kind of lost it. Yeah. The masculine, feminine, it's an interesting thing to play with and to work with, but it's really about unprogramming. You know, it's less about the teaching, because I think I put a post on this. The best sort of teaching is actually in helping the person unlearn stuff they've taught, right? They've learned. And that's what I'm having to do a lot of with people, because they've just, the spiritual path or the therapeutic path, the psychological, because psychology has become really popularized. I think it's part of the pop culture now. And so people come with all these words of gaslighting and what that means. And they cling on to these concepts very firmly. And the firmer they cling on to them, the more of a sign that there's actually some kind of egoic trauma response happening underneath that. So it's just about stripping as much as, you know, not my favorite thing to do, but what I find myself doing quite a lot of is simply helping people to come out of all that, holding all those concepts, all this ideology, and to drop back into their humanity.
Yeah.
And then when I can sit with them in that pure human connection, that place of witnessing, of acceptance, of sometimes unguarded connection, but even there, I'm careful, because sometimes we have to sit in guarded connection. Sometimes people don't have especially the ones who've been very deeply indoctrinated in this idea, I have to strip everything off myself. I have to be open and connected in my naked soul way, fully vulnerable. No, you're frying yourself doing that.
Yeah.
So sometimes the person is just, actually, I get them to hide in some way, right? They're actually needing to hide. They need permission to hide. It's okay to hide from witnessing. And so I get them sometimes to put a blanket over them in the session and to take into their nervous system the experience of permission to hide in the presence of another and be accepted for it. So, you know, and that's why I love this work, because it's so creative. It's like, it's so artistic, it's soulfully artistic, because you're just playing with soul, with each other's soul, with the connection that can go anywhere. There's never a formula for it. Every session, even with the same person, is so vastly different. And there's so many ways that you can connect and drop in with this person. You know, sometimes it's about doing energetic work. So I can shift things in the other person, and sometimes there's a time and place to do that. Sometimes it's about working with the nervous system, helping them access resources. And at other times, it's about, so sometimes it's about confronting certain aspects within them. Other times it's about me dropping, to use the polarity term, into my feminine and being incredibly receptive, to really let them seep deeply into me, because they've never had the chance to be received or to penetrate someone else, to have a clean masculine in them be met by my feminine. And then sometimes, and this is like often my favorite sessions, is when I'm in such a deep, present, still space of holding them, that they begin to talk through a story, and then they begin to unravel in that story, because they're in the sheer witnessing container, and it goes on for the entire session. I don't have to do anything. I just have to be everything with them, and it's like they're being held, and they can just see themselves, and they can just unpack and unravel within the session. It just truly reminds me, it's got this sacred feeling about it. It reminds me of, confessionals. I believe that the esoteric meanings of confessionals was for that. You don't see the priest, you're confessing to somebody's witnessing to God's consciousness. So yeah, it's very different, I guess, each session of how I work with each individual, and it just depends on what they need. And sometimes I get it wrong. And I think as therapists and healers, we need to own when that happens, when we've disconnected. That's another thing that therapists struggle with. I need to come in, I need to know all the answers, and I need to be perfect. And they're looking at me like I've healed and solved everything. So I need to be that for them. That's something I struggled with in the very beginning. And then I realized it's my humanity that was the most connecting, that was the most trustworthy container for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I really feel like there is, in every teaching, there is like the seed of every teaching is truth, and is there is something valuable like in every teaching, but the more it spreads and the more people interpret it, because we bring our patterns to whatever we do, wherever we go, like we see through our own lens. So like any teaching can be distorted. And so I'm sure that, at the core of polarity, there is beautiful, something valuable, but then it grows, and it just molds, and then it becomes its own like kind of monster that just became something completely else from its essence. And it's the same with like all the teachings. And I really feel like it's important to have wisdom, not just information, but really have wisdom to discern and to know ourselves when we are seeing things, when we are distorting, seeing our patterns, and how we bring our patterns to everything that we do, and to not really take everything so solid and so serious, like allow it to just be malleable and kind of fluid, and be open to things changing and shifting, and not just be like really rigid, like this is it, this is the way, and that's how things are, right? Being kind of
absolutely. And I think, for a good teacher, a good therapist, or a good healer, right, I think it's their responsibility to watch what the client does with what you say or what you give them. And so often, sometimes I see, clients will grasp onto what I say and turn it into more, more ideology, right? They've missed the grain of truth, for example, I've given them, or they've taken it, but they've also created something out of it. And that's when I see that, I don't give them more information. I challenge them immediately to drop what they've just identified with. And then we work or look at or explore at what mechanism in that likes to do that. Is it that they're pedestaling me, and so everything I say is the word of God? Or does it give them safety to hear something that's said by me? Now, sometimes I let people do that because, again, it's individual. Some people need safety. Some people need to believe in someone else, or they need concepts to keep them safe in their minds, not to drop into too much trauma.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's time to work through that to access some of that trauma. Yeah. So, I've had people kind of constantly have this energy of need, on me, especially with my cultural background, right? There's always this reliance on the expert. And so there's this energy of like, tell me the answers, and I'm going to push you and manipulate you until you give me what I want. And so in those sessions, in those clients, more often than not, I'm doing the exact opposite. Now, this is where I guess, enough experience has lent me in confidence that I don't need the other person to like or approve of me. I'm not worried about them rejecting or abandoning or even persecuting me anymore.
Yeah.
Because if I did, then I would give them what they want, or I would kind of not be very clean about it and try to maneuver around it, just because I want it to be a nice relationship or a nice interaction. And so then I'm not doing my job as a counselor or a healer. And so it's about not enabling that pattern, but it's still about inquiring and giving them the safety of why they're needing the safety of information from me. So it's not about just disabling and dismantling this pattern straight away. It's not about feeding it either. It's about exploring what gives them safety in their nervous system in a different way than their reliance on someone else.
Yeah, and I feel like the kind of space that we are in is very open and it's very kind of fluid, and for many people that may be really scary, you know, just that swimming in that deep ocean. And you know, there's that need to have kind of structure and have safety, stability, right? So like, how can we kind of bring people back from this vast open ocean so that they kind of can come back to their bodies and feel safe, like if they are watching now, and you know, how not to feel so overwhelmed, because I can, you know, I think it can be overwhelming if you don't have that inner stability, right?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's up to the therapist, at least in some places, to offer that stability energetically with their sense of holding. But it's also about then not abandoning them out of that space, let's say when the session's done. If they've been holding on to you on some level, how do you empower their nervous system to take that in from the session, carrying it forward? Because they can't take me with them.
Yeah.
So again, it's just different methodologies for that, working with the nervous system, working within the session personally, but then transpersonally empowering them to take it into their lives. But you're absolutely right. The safety is paramount, because I'm always biting my tongue when I want to say a lot of therapists out there, because I don't want to put anyone down. I mean, but there is in the New Age spirituality movement this understanding ideology of elevating vulnerability, elevating dismantling, demonizing the ego. And from that place, there's a constant breakdown and smashing down of things that have actually kept us safe. It's like, yeah, they're unhealthy. They maybe not be the healthiest ways, but what's more unhealthy is letting them go without putting something else in place.
Yeah, I think it really just boils down to approval and acceptance of the human condition, and not forcing ourselves into something else, and of forcing, needing ourselves to change in order to, right? If it's a natural arising, if that's what feels really good, like, okay, I want to explore this and shift into this, like that's fine. But if it's something like external or like forced, or it just doesn't, like it's difficult to speak to this really, because it's so individual. It's so like you said, you know, it's very difficult to give kind of advice, because it will be misinterpreted. And I know that there's a real danger of putting this stuff out, you know, when you write something and people take it and take it through their filter and apply it to themselves as a kind of self-flagellation rather than something good, right? And it's, so I'm always kind of careful, you know, how to say things.
And that's exactly why I write, and I often talk, and hopefully I've done that. I mean, I've been keeping track, but that's why I'm always very careful with expressing myself, you know, by stating something and then showing how that can be very different in the next kind of situation and case. Because that does not allow whoever's receiving the information to kind of grab onto this as the truth anymore, but rather to inquire, well, okay, so what's my unique situation and case here?
Yeah, I think this is why it's so important to have a teacher. Like, people don't realize how important it is to have a mentor, to have a guide, to have a teacher, especially when they're in that space of confusion and not knowing really what's right, what's wrong, what's what it's that space of overwhelm and confusion. And even if you're not in the space of overwhelm and confusion, even if you are kind of clear, but that clarity and that certainty can be another pitfall, right? So it's always so valuable to have a teacher, to have someone who can show you where you're blocking yourself, where you're being too much or too little, or because it's like, yes, we can read books and do all these things, but it's never going to be another person, another perspective on us, because we cannot really see ourselves fully. Right?
Yeah, I mean, and to stay true to the paradoxical nature of our conversation, I'd like to add that even though that's true for some, I would suggest that for others, they just need to have a train wreck experience in life without a mentor or coach, and that's how they'll learn. I've had the clients, and I've had experiences in my life where it's like, I've gone to therapists and I'm like, please help me change this. I need the help. And no matter how hard they tried, nothing would shake me out of whatever I was in. And I had to go through the train wreck experience because I was trying to do everything not to actually, end that relationship in that case, right? I had to go through it, and then I learned. So yeah, you're right that sometimes, and it's great and useful to have teachers and therapists, but most people out there live their lives without them. And it's like, they still learn, and that's okay. It's just, it can be helpful and it can be accelerating, can be, not always, to have someone. But it's also very important to find the right person, because finding the wrong person can be detrimental and opposite, right? As I'm sure you know, it's like you can start following someone who ends up getting into a codependent or abusive therapist-client relationship.
Yeah.
So the sense of trust and resonance is so important with this person. So anyone out there, it's like, I mean, I want to give the advice of like pick and choose, but at the same time, if you have the pattern of constantly dropping and running from person to person, then pick one and choose and stay with one for a while.
Yeah.
There's no panacea answer.
Yeah, and ultimately there is no right and wrong, and that's why whenever somebody comes to offer me this is right, this is wrong, I immediately have some sort of I'm not sure, because really there isn't, and I really want people to know that there is no right or wrong answer, and it always really depends, and there's like nobody can tell anybody what's right or wrong for them. Like we have to find our own ultimately.
Yeah, and at the same time, for some people who come, and at the same time, for somebody who comes to me and they're really shaky and they're full of anxiety, and they come to me for an answer, an anchor to hold on to, I am going to give them a right response.
Yeah.
But in a few months' time, when they're ready, I'm going to say exactly what you said, that there is no right or wrong, and take away the anchor again.
This is so fun.
Yeah, I know. Totally.
But I feel like we've covered enough, and like I feel complete. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or you feel also?
No, I feel pretty good. Happy to have another chat and explore other things if you'd like at a future date. Awesome. Otherwise, yeah, if somebody does resonate with what I'm saying and what I'm bringing, then by all means get in touch on Facebook, or I think you're going to list the contact details with me or with Roxana. And yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to discuss, what I believe, and it's really nice to connect with you finally.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been really fun, and I hope that people enjoy. And yeah, if you have any questions or comments, do let us know, and definitely connect with Igor or me for more juicy nuggets. Okay, lots of love. Bye.
Bye.